You're tuned in to the MtG Cable cast, where they cover Magic, the Gathering finance. All right? You don't know about it? You're tuned in right now and get ready to learn some shit. Buckle your seatbelts and light a blunt and get ready for the MtG Cable cast. Starring Reptar and Thirsty, them onion head motherfuckers.
All right, guys, welcome to the newest episode of the Cabal Cast, and this week it is our Lost Cavers of Ixalan hype review. Basically, like we do with a lot of sets, what cards are Goldilocks? Too much, too little, just right. Yeah. We've each picked one card with, probably we'll meander into a couple of others on each of the lists,
100%.
But with that, let's get it started.
All right, so for me, up top, I'm looking at two cards that I think are a little bit overhyped in Constructed. One has been getting a lot of noise, no pun intended, based on the name, and it is Trumpeting Carnosaur. I think this card is good, but it's a little bit, I think it's overhyped right now. It's being blown out of proportion in formats that aren't Pioneer. The Discover mechanic, whatever it is extremely popular. It's extremely powerful. It can do some ridiculous things. But in older formats, you have the ability to like multiple sphere this or shut off ETBs a lot easier than just having the card Hushbringer and Pioneer. And so I think ultimately Carnosaur will do things in Standard in the long run. It will do things in Pioneer most likely, but I think it's going to kind of be relegated maybe to like a Greasefang level once people learn how to fight it. I don't think it's an absolute.
Yeah.
In Modern and Legacy, it was a little bit more damning because the deck kind of came about during Eternal Weekend Prague travel weekends. So this is another good example of when the cat's away, the mice will play. And so we saw a lot of results come up from Legacy from shells that looked very similar to a deck called Mississippi River, which basically just played Maelstrom Wanderer and a bunch of Cascade creatures. Yep. Maelstrom Wanderer gives them all haste, and you swing in. So Trumpeting Carnosaur goes in that deck, even mixed in with a little bit of Show and Tell and Omniscience tech. The deck still kind of folds to multiple sphere effects, which is what happened in Legacy. Lands got better. They started playing spheres in the main. D&D started to pick up in popularity. You have more Thalias and Thorns running around. And ultimately, a deck that just can't pay for the hits it cascades into folds. And so it falls out of the meta. And so I think that's what's going to happen to Carnosaur. So right now, it's a $9 card, and it's only been on the rise because of what's been going on in Pioneer, basically. And I think that's what's going to happen long term. It's just kind of been blown out of proportion because there weren't enough checks and balances in place. Similarly, the card right behind it, to me, is very similar. And it is Tishana's Tidebinder. So you talk about the meandering up front. I want to talk about this card overall because I think this is a card that is good.
It's good.
It is good long term. It has immediate implications, but I don't think
$20 good.
Yeah, or whatever. Right now, according to this, it's like $20 for a $40 or a $40 foil. It ETBs and it's a humility. It just turns a creature off, but it also does it permanently. So when you're looking at this in the long term, you want to be able to like ensure your triggers last, so you're going to be looking to remove this creature overall. And in Modern, it's really easy. In Legacy, it's really easy. This doesn't die to just a regular Fatal Push. You got to kick it, no pun intended, when it comes to Fatal Push. But Bolt just destroys it. You have Swords,
Shock, Swords,
Fury,
Path, Fury,
there's Leyline Binding, etc.
Discarding Trumpeting Carnosaur.
Exactly. Like, you have a lot of options to get rid of this card, so I think this is going to be good, but I don't think it's going to be great. It's definitely not going to push Merfolk. It's another 3-mana Merfolk that just kind of does a whole lot of nothing. That deck is basically full of Lords and Air, and if you have to actually cast this for 3, you're going to have a really bad time. And if you're shoving this through a vial, that means it's turn 4 or later, and the game should be close to over. So at the end of the day, I think the amount of hype on this card for, again, older formats is not where it needs to be. I think this is a very good Pioneer and Standard card, but I don't think this really stands the test of time in Modern and Legacy. So the hype around this card for me is a little too extra for older formats, and people like wanted to hone in on that, and I think it's wrong for both of them.
Yeah, I think especially for Tishana's Tidebinder, the thing for me is like, look, this is a rare from a standard legal set, so it should not command this price at all.
No.
It just shouldn't. It shouldn't be a $15 rare. It's not.
Nope.
Speaking of cards, it just shouldn't have the price point. My over is the alt art caverns that are all over the place. I get it, guys. We're really excited. We have a new treatment for a card that's actually playable, compared to the Hitotsugus, which I think outside of the WPN Premium one, they're all like sub $20. Now, I'm not saying that these caverns get to sub $20, but I am telling you that 300, 200 plus for these, for a card that has a pedigree, has decks that it goes into.
Yep.
But unfortunately, the only spot it's legal in now that it wasn't before is Pioneer. And while, yeah, Humans is going to get a huge boost from this, I don't think it merits the demand for the price point, especially when you consider that this is in like your normal boosters. It's not just in, collector boosters as the Mana Crypt is.
Yeah.
This is going to be something that's going to be opened. It's not that good anymore, frankly. I hate to say it, but Cavern, those days are gone.
Yep.
Humans in Modern is not there anymore. If these Mana Crypts, the low-end Mana Crypt is 181. That should be more than Cavern. That Mana Crypt is worth it. Those Caverns are not worth $300 each. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
They're just not.
You made a good point about Hitotsugu, and I think that's important to remember, is like that has Provenance as being the first type of card to receive this treatment, and as such it should receive that kind of bump. Cavern of Souls and Crypt, whatever else comes of this kind of series, can be set aside as being like novelties in comparison to this. Cavern is not ultimately the most playable. It is Crypt, like you said. Right now, I think there's only one deck I can think of that sees tournament play that relies on Cavern, and it's Doomsday and Legacy.
Yeah.
And it sets Cavern to either Merfolk or Wizard, so you can uncounterably play Thassa's Oracle.
Yep.
Like, I don't think there's anything right now in Modern that plays Cavern. Like, the Humans deck doesn't exist. There's no real Taxes deck to speak of. I don't think it ran Cavern beforehand. I could be wrong on that. And in Pioneer, unless there's a Humans deck, it's very difficult to imagine that you need to be dodging counter spells in a format that doesn't have a control deck.
Them really. Yeah.
So...
And it's just too much.
Yep.
Just is.
Agreed. Wholeheartedly. Treatment is nice though.
Treatment is very nice, absolutely.
Moving along to underhyped, for me, the card that stood out amongst the bunch was Saheeli, the Sun's Brilliance, and I joked about this before the cast. Every time there's a Saheeli, we pick it at some point as being something ridiculous. This one, however, is a creature, not a planeswalker, so it could be your commander, though I don't think that's where it's going to live. This is a 2/2 for a blue and a red, and it has an activated ability of a blue and a red. Tap, create a token that's a copy of another target creature or artifact you control, except it's an artifact in addition to its other types. It gains haste, sacrifice it at the beginning of the next end step. And my immediate thought is, oh, this just goes to infinity and beyond with something like Freed from the Real, which just allows you to tap or untap a creature for the cost of a lowly blue. Yep. Then after that, what do you want to combo it with? And people are already starting to work on it, though it is kind of narrow with what they're doing. I don't think they've seen this card, which is why I believe it's underhyped. When you play the Chromatic Orrery, you make 5 mana on the spot, so you net 2 mana every time you make a copy of it with Saheeli. That is a very cromulent option. There's already combos out there on EDHREC, I believe, if it's hooked into Commander Spellbook. If it's not, CommanderSpellbook.com already has some combos that are being generated for this. I don't see this being the commander of the deck. I think you do need to play 3 colors for this to be the most optimal. So as such, this is another cog in the wheel like that. But that machine is going to be ridiculous, I believe, with your options that are in front of you. Like, people want to play this with like Brutaclad and like Herp, making some tokens. Like, nope. I'm going to combo with this. That's what I'm going to do. I think this is really good at it overall, and I think it's going to be really easy to do, and I think it might be like kind of acceptable, because if you're not going to combo with it, you can do some derp stuff with it, and it's all fine and dandy. So it gets past that weird like rub that you see from Commander players when people try and combo out. It's also pretty succinct when you just look at it in Chromatic Orrery. What do you do? I mean, you make infinite mana, and after that I'm going to do whatever I want. You can go back and you can look at Staff of Domination combo. 3 cards, infinite everything. Cool. We'll figure it out from there. And it doesn't really take a lot of time. The package is pretty small, and at the end of the day, I think this is a really decent card. Financially speaking, it's like $1 and change, and it's like really easy pickings. I picked some up just because I'm kind of waiting for it to go. I might build around it and I might not, but I've got like 8. Like, cool. I'll hold on to it. I think this might be like one of the breakout underhyped cards from the set. It's just one of those things that in time people are going to figure out you can do a lot with a little when it comes to this card.
Yeah, I think the important thing about this is it is obviously in the Artificer colors because it is Saheeli, but I think a lot of people are looking at it as a combo card, rightfully so. I also think it's just a good incremental value engine.
Yeah.
Being able to 2 mana into some mana positive rock, or 2 mana into an extra Sundering Titan, or,
Yeah.
Extra Blightsteel, whatever the case is. It's really nice to have this as like an incremental engine as well as being the combo piece. And at 2 mana, it's not that intrusive.
No,
It's easy to get out.
It also copies creatures if you want to play like the wizard kind of stuff. If you want to play
Yep.
small ball with like Kess and like
Yeah.
go kind of that route, you can make copies of creatures. It doesn't just have to be artifacts for that kind of combo. You can if you really want to play small ball as an Archaeomancer or whatever, two blue for a 2/2 that returns an instant or sorcery. Like cool. You can play a value game with it. So I think there's more to be played. If we settle into that direction, though, I think from a financial standpoint, it's just going to flop out as like a regular bulk rare.
For sure.
But if it starts playing as a combo general, I think, as a bulk mythic, I think it'll kind of pop to like $3 to $5 if we actually see it like kind of take over. So for me, that's underhyped in this set. You, on the other hand, went still blue, but in a different direction.
Underhyped was actually it was the red one. Which is strange. So my pick for underhype is Bonehorde Dracosaur. Now, why am I picking a $20 card as underhyped? So, if you've been following Standard for the last 3 years, there's always 1 or 2 mythics that actually carry a price point. Now, this one I don't think is going to be $20 forever in the short term. But I absolutely think this could occupy long-term a Sheoldred style spot where it is that $30 to $40 mythic, because the card is just insane. Mm-hmm. So 3 and 2 red for a 5/5 flying first strike. At the beginning of your upkeep, Reckless Impulse. So exile the top 2 cards of your library, you can play them. If you exile a land, you get a Spark Elemental.
Yeah.
Only it's a dinosaur. If you exile a non-land, you get a treasure token. So even just by exiling the 2 cards, you get insane advantage. The other thing I really like about this card is it has 2 of the most Timmy creature types you could possibly imagine. It's a Dino Dragon.
Mm-hmm.
That's great. It is the most casual card when you look at it. Just like glance at what it does, you're like, okay, this is a casual card. Except it's an efficiently costed body that continually generates you card advantage at the higher levels of play. Yeah. It's something that you have to answer because it snowballs so fast. You're literally recalling every turn. You draw 3 cards every single turn. So that kind of effect is obviously very powerful. Now, I will say I don't think this card exists in Eternal formats. I think it exists in EDH.
It has to.
And I think that in EDH, that's where this card gets to the price point that it's going to. I think the other nice thing with this is we now know, courtesy of the Ian Malcolm Secret Lair Super Drop, that we are going to have Secret Lair support for dinosaurs as well as, we've had it for dragons before. Mm-hmm. But that gives us more opportunity for cards to go incredibly well with this. That said, I think this is a longer-term underhyped card. I think short-term it probably does dip to the 10 to 15 mark, but I think in a year you probably see it creep up to that $30, $40 line is what I'd expect.
Okay.
It's just, I think, a very powerful effect for the cost.
Yeah, I had this on my overhyped list until I decided to lock in, and what got me off of this as being overhyped was that enough people were talking about this from a constructed standpoint that I had to kind of set aside my biases of you need to untap with this card before it does anything. In constructed format, especially one like Standard where you still have Sheoldred wandering around, there are some threats that are just more important to take out than this. So this is a really good backup. If you go Sheoldred on 4, Dracosaur on 5, those are back-to-back heavy.
You can't lose.
Yeah, you're doing really good with that deck. And so setting that aside, I listened to a lot of reviews from a constructed standpoint. I think it is appropriately hyped from that side. Maybe a little underhyped depending on what, like you're saying, basic on what constructed is going to look like. But for me, this doesn't. It reads like a silly commander card, but the drawback is you have to untap with it, and I really dislike having to wait for that. I understand the power of a card like Helix Pinnacle because it has hexproof, so it's difficult to deal with.
Yeah.
This just has flying and first strike. It is a 5/5, which is out of the range of most red removal, but for black removal, it's very, very easy to hit this card overall.
And white, obviously, because white just doesn't care.
Oh, 100%. But like I said, at the end of the day, having to untap to take advantage of this is really what kind of gets me. If it was like the Carpet of Flowers, new text, which is once at the beginning of either phase.
main phase you pick. Yeah.
Yeah, you did this. I think it would be pretty good overall, but otherwise it seems to, for me, be a struggle to really want to not get this to work, but see this kind of take hold as a $20+ card. That doesn't mean it won't. It just means those are my biases, and that's the way I see this. Moving on to Just Right, for me, I think this one, from a hype standpoint, is the Skullspore Nexus. And this is 6 and a double green for a legendary artifact. This spell costs X less to cast, where X is the greatest power among creatures you control. Whenever one or more non-token creatures you control die, create a green fungus dinosaur creature token with base power and toughness, each equal to the total power of those creatures. Then 2 and tap, double target creature's power until end of turn. So this basically just kind of re-ups your threat. And if the first part reads like a Great Henge clone, it's because this kind of is like a Great Henge clone. And the reason I think this is just right is because when I read this card, cool, this is a commander card. Overall, it's pretty agnostic. Just because it's making fungus dinosaurs doesn't mean it really needs to play in like a fungus or dinosaur deck, because it triggers off your creatures dying and it just replaces your creatures. So you're just playing it in a creature deck like the Great Henge. So this kind of goes along the same routes. And as such, a set that brings us 4 tribes, or 4 types, whatever, for this that you're going to play, this seems pretty easy to slot into any one of them that plays green, and thus by extension, any other creature-based decks that are going to play green. So this checks a lot of the same boxes the Great Henge does. And when you check Rec, it is the number 3 just card in the set overall. Let's see if I still have this up. I do. It is right now Roaming Throne, Galto Stampede Tyrant, and Skullspore Nexus for just cards in the set. And Skullspore Nexus has been number 3 for like the entirety of a week. It's just been kind of sitting there, and I think that is appropriately hyped for this card overall. At an $11 price tag, is that the final price we'll see? No, I would say this ventures up towards 15 or 20 because it is nice, it is agnostic, it replaces your creatures. And instead of playing it in a token deck, which people are probably like experimenting with now, I probably think this sits more in like a mid-range to chonky style deck where a lot of your creatures are going to have power and or toughness 3 or greater. And so you're going to start making some pretty big tokens with this, so you can just kind of come back from those wraths. And I think this just exists in the commander format the same way Great Henge does. This has to be dealt with very similarly to how the Great Henge is dealt with, otherwise it spirals out of control. And it's going to be just as annoying in a format as the Great Henge is, because they are both incredible value engines overall. So from a hype perspective, I think the Skullspore Nexus is just spot on banger for where it is.
I think the most important line of text to me is honestly the last line of text on this card. 2 tap, double a power. Because everything else is automatic. So look, as long as I have 2 colorless, I can make one of the fattest tokens on the board, and that's great. I also think, like you said, it is agnostic to any kind of token style, which, guess what? Selesnya is the best token combination.
Yeah.
So it slides right in there as another doubling effect. And doubling effects obviously have a history of being some of the more valuable cards. I think this card is great. Definitely also agree this should be a top 5 card in the set.
Yeah.
Short, long term, whatever, it's just good.
Yeah, exactly.
Honestly.
This is like a really good example of a card where we don't even have to look at the finances, because this is a hype. We're just talking about levels of hype around this card. And even though like social media has been quiet on this compared to a lot of others, the people who are self-identifying and report to EDH Rec are saying that this is a top 5 card in the set, and it's been number 3, and I think that is perfectly fine. Again, card in the set, not commander, not like land or whatever. Just go to set, click on card, bang, number 3, and I think that is choice. That's where we're supposed to be.
Agreed. My just right, and this is in terms of financial value, is Deep Root Pilgrimage. It's blue 1. Whenever a non-token merfolk becomes tapped, make a token. Everyone seems to think this is going to break through in Constructed. There is no way this card is not good enough to break through in a fish deck. I think this card lives in the EDH, and that is why I think the price is relatively appropriate.
Yeah.
Because it is a combo engine that works with like Godsire and True to Lar, Marrow Regery, stuff like that, where you're kind of in that 75% range. You're not Battlecruiser Timmy. You're not CEDH, but you have some really good synergies and combos that, if left unchecked, can just win the game. And this falls very squarely into that, which is why I think that, $2, bulk quote price range is about where it should be. Now, Eternal Weekend happened, came and went. There was no showing of fish there in Europe. I assume it's going to be the same for North America and China, but I could be wrong. Maybe Eastern Asia has it pop. Maybe Pitt has it pop. I just don't see this breaking into any 60 card format because the barrier for entry in legacy fish is way too high for this to make it. And fish just doesn't exist elsewhere. People try to make it work, but come on, guys, just stop.
Yeah.
It doesn't work.
So when I read this card, my first thought was like, oh, they're trying to remake a Merfolk or a card in the Merfolk deck in the style of Wake Thrasher. And I'll bring this up for people who didn't play lore when constructed. In the Azor Merfolk deck, this was effectively your finisher. Two and a blue. It was
very good.
2 and a blue for a 1/1. Whenever a permanent you control becomes untapped, Wake Thrasher gets +1/+1 until end of turn. And that does combo a little bit with Reedree, because Reedree lets you tap or untap target permanent. It doesn't matter who controls it, right? So you can untap that. Or more often than not, you would pay 3 to play Wake Thrasher, untap your 3 lands, and now you have a 4/4 that's coming in. But at the end of the day, this card was not good enough to make it into any Merfolk list. True Name Nemesis is just a better Merfolk overall.
It's so good.
So what are you looking to do in constructed Merfolk? Well, just make some friends for the next turn. Well, okay, you could play Master of the Tides from Theros and just make, a bunch of elementals instead equal to your devotion to blue. Exactly. And win. It's a faster way to make those tokens. So I don't know exactly what this card is supposed to be doing in modern and older formats. There are enough Merfolk and Pioneer to kind of make that work if you stretch into Simic, and that's not a bad thing, but you don't have enough Lords in that deck to actually make it work, and that's the problem. Merfolk was affectionately called 12 Lords for a while for a reason, and when you don't have a critical mass of Lords, that deck can't really exist. And you can try and clone them as many times as you want, that's fine, but you still need a starting point. And when you don't have a critical mass of cards to clone, it doesn't work out too well. I don't think Pioneer has Spreading Seas either, which makes it a little more difficult. Not Mystical Archives, the Woe sheet had Spreading Seas on it, but that doesn't mean it's legal in Pioneer, and I don't think that card came in through any of the through any other means. So it just makes makes it really difficult for Deeproot Pilgrimage, in my mind, to see play in Pioneer.
Yeah, it doesn't. The meta's not there for it. There are tribal decks that do it better. Humans, what's left of it, Winota obviously has changed, but there's better tribes for that than fish. And this is something that I think getting into the fish mindset with it is kind of a trap, but that's why it exists in EDH. It goes in your Godsire, your Intruder Alarms, your just value token lists if you want to go Bant.
Yeah.
This can go in there just fine. But I don't see it, again, especially being a rare and a collector booster set, having much upside compared to where it is now. I think it's appropriately priced. It is appropriately hyped. I know there have been people talking about getting it into Legacy Fish or trying it, but it's literally, I guess I'm going to try it because I haven't had anything new for the deck for the last 5 years.
Exactly.
So I just want to feel something again. Let's throw it in there.
I know people who are at least started last week or maybe this week playing Fish because of Tidebinder.
Yeah.
The Tishana's Tidebinder, like we just talked about. They think it's going to be good enough in a deck that doesn't play Soul Lands, and I'm kind of remiss to think that that's going to work. Like, you can counter a Leyline Binding trigger, my guy, but, the Terminus that'll come off the top in time from the Beans deck is that's the other hand, and it's coming quick. So I really don't know what the expectation is there. But all right. Anything else before I move on to picks?
No, let's do it.
All right, you go first because you got the big dumb dino.
Yes, I have the big dumb dinosaur. So I am going with Zakama, OG, all the way back from Ixalan block. Now, why? Well, obviously we're getting dinosaurs. Duh. That's why I picked it. I literally picked it because we're getting dinosaurs again. And again, like I said last episode, I'm going to try to get a little bit more anecdotal and talk about stuff that we've been asked about in store as a pick and get more of the LGS perspective. This is something that I tracked. In the last week, we have sold 36 copies of this card because it's people who are coming in and saying, hey, I want to build a dinosaur deck. I want to start in Jund, whatever. Now, is it the commander? I don't know. Is it in the 99? I don't know. The fact of the matter is that this card is starting to move at the local level,
Yep.
and it's at a really good price point right now.
For
It
sure.
it is a bulk card. Now, we just had, Commander Masters, obviously, which was a pretty big print run of this card. Judge promo is a Judge promo, pre-release, all that. But this is something that I think is a very good opportunity to get on at the $2 to $3 range while we're at almost the all-time low in terms of price.
Yeah.
But also, we're in a weird kind of like peak hype time. So one of two things is going to happen. Either the price stays the same or it goes up. Worst case, if this price stays the same, dinosaurs have proven that they are incredibly popular in Magic. The set sells really well. We have licensing crossovers now. Again, we have Ian Malcolm in the Super Secret Lair or whatever. We're getting licensed Jurassic Park stuff in. This is one of those cards that I think is a good opportunity for liquidity now and is a really good opportunity for value later down the line when we start to get more exposure here, more cards in.
Yeah.
And not only that, we clearly know from like Italy and the Power Rangers coins, we're not just bound to Ixalan for this stuff. We can get dinosaurs on other planes. We've had, what was it, Raging Pygmy-saur? The one from Ice Age, the OG dinosaur?
Raging
Pygmy-Allosaurus.
Pygmy-Allosaurus, yeah. That's from
Yes.
Ice Age, yeah. So, like, they do show up. Like, we had Marauding Raptors in a core set. We do get Masks block. I think Lava Runner might be
Lava Runner's a dinosaur. There's some of the... Oh, no, they're all beasts from Urza block. But regardless, this is something that it does everything you want in the colors that dinosaurs exist.
Yes.
It ramps. Obviously, if you cast it, untap all lands. Great.
Outstanding.
Vigilance, reach, trample, axes removal, axes life gain, axes just a good utility card.
Yep.
So the fact that to me it can exist as the commander and in the 99 and be just as good is one of the reasons that I think this is a really good buy right now. Now, in terms of quantity, let's be real. This card's never breaking into a 60 card format, ever. There's better options to show and tell. Emrakul is just always better.
Yep.
It just is. But for EDH, this card's great. That said, I personally am at about 7 copies now. And that's because I literally have just been picking them up as like bulk. And I think 7's about where I'd want to be. I wouldn't want much more than that, maybe 10 at most.
That's fair.
Now, the timeline is where this one gets kind of tricky because it's kind of indefinite. It's just hold for your moment. Hold for when you can turn it into liquid. Because right now it is, 5, sub 5, somewhere in there. But it has a price history of being $10+. And if you look at the price at the stocks graph, every time we get a reprint, the price goes down, but it still sets up higher than what it bottoms out as.
Yeah.
So I fully expect that within, hopefully within the next 6 months, we'll start to see the price rebound. But what we're really looking for here is our liquidity window, and that is a lot harder to name. But once we get there, it's unload them all somehow.
Yeah. That's fine. The Zakama was kind of the secret general to the deck that I played. I was lucky enough to get a Grimlock, so that was my Nea dinosaur commander. But the ETB trigger on Zakama is incredibly powerful, and that kind of like makes the card overall, it makes it a threat to kill, right? Because the recast is extremely powerful. Insofar as where this goes, I think at this point in time, the de facto general is Puntlaza or Pantsless, depending on who you listen to.
Yeah.
Because it has a cast trigger
it's like Karn.
Yeah. An ETB trigger for it and other dinosaurs where you discover X, where X is that creature's toughness.
Yeah, toughness.
And so when
Discover 9's pretty good.
Exactly. You're going to discover 9. That allows you to look at a lot of cards and see maybe yet another large dino to kind of just go in on. So I think Zakama is a really good look in the 99, and this kind of goes along with what I've been talking about for a while, which is just like these big chunky dinosaurs that actually are pretty useful for a sundry of reasons, are where you're going to want to look for this deck overall.
Yeah.
If you go back and you watch Star City Versus, you can see Corey Baumeister do a lot of work with the Punthlaza trigger. And that thing is insane. We talked about with Trumpeting Carnosaur up top how powerful Discover can be, especially in lower powered constructed formats. Well, you know, Commander is still constructed. It can be a very high powered card if you ramp into it pretty quickly, and then some large creatures afterwards. And it gives you a lot of power, a lot of flexibility, and a lot of utility off of these cards overall. So why wouldn't you look to play the largest, most useful creatures in that type possible?
Yeah.
Like at the end of the day, it just seems easy, because once you cast a comma, you discover 9, you cast that next dinosaur from the discover, all your lands untapped. So you cast another
whatever
dinosaur.
you want to discover again.
Exactly. And you just chain discover, which makes this really, really, really good, I think, overall. So I think in the 99, I think is where you're going to see it with Punthlaza. I think we've kind of like coalesced around that card
That
as
being
the commander, for the deck. Otherwise, I think Zakama is one of the best, like the best. Gishath is good, but Zakama untaps everything, so you can just keep doing more things.
Yeah.
And I think that's where you really want to be with the dinosaur deck. And so it's kind of a toss-up between those two, but I think Zakama is going to be a 99 card. Yeah. So as such, 7 is fine, because that quantity is an issue that I've been talking about as well with my picks.
Yeah.
How many dinosaur decks are really going to be at your locals? How many people are going to be buying in time? And you've got to kind of, like you said, pick your moment to move out, which is great, because if you can do it locally as these cards go up, sure, run it out.
Even
Otherwise,
better,
sit on it for buy list, because not a lot of this stuff is getting reprinted as you would expect. So I think all of it is solid. For me, I am looking at another red utility card in Professional Facebreaker today.
Love that card so much.
Very good card.
Yeah, it is. I'll let you go, because I also think this card is a great pickup right now, but please, yes.
It is, 2 and a red for a 2/3 with Menace, which doesn't matter. Whenever one or more creatures you control deals combat damage to a player, create a treasure token. Cool. It doesn't have to be Professional Facebreaker.
Yeah.
Then it has an activated ability. Sacrifice a treasure, exile the top card of your library. You may play that card this turn. Cool. This is just a really good value card.
Yeah.
When I started looking at this card in early October, CK was buying 23 at $4.40. There were 332 listings on TCG Player LP or better at $4.73. In August, CK had a retail supply of 8 at $7.50, and they were buying 84 at $4.20.
Blaze it.
Yeah, I know, right? When I was taking my notes, they were buying 75 at $4.40. Retail, I forgot to write down those numbers. I wrote down foil sell price instead, but I can check that live. But currently, they were buying 67, down from 75, but the buy price is still the same. So it kind of tells you they're moving it pretty easily. The market information for TCG Player is that there are 289 listings at $5.31 market price, and I believe we're still
currently out of stock on Card Kingdom.
There you go, perfect. So they sold out, and TCG Market is actually very close to $6. They're down to 271 listings, so this card is actively moving. And we read the card. But what does it do? It is a multi-axis value card for commander decks playing red that want to enter the combat step, because this card does nothing if you don't. At the end of the day, that one's pretty straightforward. So we are continuing the trend of cards that kind of speak for themselves. Professional Facebreaker seems to currently embody everything that wants red to be doing in Commander, and that is attacking, making an obscene amount of treasure tokens, and exiling cards off the top of that player's library. So this is a pretty honest card in the same vein as Edric, Spy Master of Trest, where it can either enter combat if you want it to, or it can just hang back and be a value engine. And if you're playing red, regardless of what theme you're playing, you should be playing this card to help give you additional velocity or resources at all stages of the game, as long as you're entering combat. Again, that's the caveat here. Now, treasures aren't hard to come by, but at some point between playing lands, your regular ramp spells and rocks, and making treasures from most of your spells, you'll have access to an excess of treasures, and translating that excess into extra cards via Facebreaker's activated ability allows you to start playing from ahead, because you basically get to kind of draw And if you draw dead with that exile, well, guess what? That card's gone. You don't have to worry about it now. You traded a very small, easy to come by resource to filter out a card that was just useless. And does this card combo out? Yes, very easily. When you take a look at Rec or Commander Spellbook, you see there's just a litany of ways to combo out. Is this card played in CEDH because it screams like it should? Yes, it definitely is. And it is played alongside, you guessed it, Dockside Extortionist. Exactly. Yeah. So we're at the end of the day, we're looking at an engine card with a pedigree that will churn excess treasures into value for anyone at any level of competitiveness. And that's kind of the thing, again, that I like about cards like this, is just you could be really competitive with it in CEDH, so we have that audience, or you can be just kind of like low to the ground and just doing the things that WotC wants you to be doing in red casually, and it plays there too. It is not a very offensive card in the sense that it will create, like, rub against sensibilities. What are you doing? Just turning this extra resource into cards that I can actually fucking play. It's like, instead of just drawing dead. You know, you can set it up with Sensei's Dividing Top to clear chaff off if you want. There are so many things you could be doing with this card that are very easy and low to the ground, that help your gameplay, that aren't offensive, but help you stay in the game and maybe even pull ahead. It's a very unassuming card that can do very powerful things. When it comes to a timeline, we can see this is a very slow gainer based on the stocks graph, and buying in at any point really will yield profit in the long run, but there seems like there will be two distinct timelines. The open market sees almost daily growth, so there is the opportunity to flip this card immediately, so the longer you wait, the more you can make. If you're looking at buy list, the other timeline, it'll probably be closer to about 6 months before we see the delta between buy list and current market price close, though there is an arbitrage opportunity for a small amount of CK credit right now. That, like, in the neighborhood of maybe 30 to 80 cents a copy. Not a lot, but that is there. So it tells you that the delta, while in existence, is pretty small, but it's going to kind of take a time before you can see positive outcome from this. At current velocity, we'd see TCG stock drain in about 2 months, with an interesting wrinkle being that the Gaming Co. is anchoring the foil price to $6.93 with 113 copies, because of course they are.
Well, that was when they opened products, so.
I know. And it's always something I have to check for when I'm looking at this. Like, what's the timeline and where's the Gaming Co. in this list?
Yep.
Where are we? Reprint equity. Now, this is a weird beer. The most unique part of this card is the name, and it feels like it could hit a reprint in any one of the upcoming sets, like Thunder Junction or the two... any set where you could basically just kind of find a scallywag who just wants to punch somebody in the face. That's
Thunder Junction release, because that's the Western set, right? That's the one that I think we're most likely to see it if we see it.
Yes, yeah. Or
if we dodge that, I think we're golden.
Or you can do a universes within, and like I said, just rename it to like some kind of pugilist, and you're fine, because that's kind of what the name is meant to evoke. But in a not a gangster, but like professional face breaker, is just like your hired goon, like your Simpsons you're hired goon, kind of way. And a lot of these upcoming sets have that opportunity, even in some of the animal stuff, which I don't know that well. There does seem to be the opportunity where you could get a reprint of this card, because it's just kind of like really generic, because it's doing everything WotC wants Red to be doing. It doesn't like anchor itself anywhere. And so I think that is kind of like the damning part. And could we see this in Commander sets in the future? Yeah, absolutely. But for the time being, I think we're kind of like okay to buy in. This is just a card that's going to be good until the end of time. But remember, the reprint equity here is really kind of odd because of how generic all parts of this card are. By quantity, I think somewhere between 8 and a dozen is a fine look. Moving these to players out of your binder might be a bit difficult, as not all red-based players or decks make enough treasures to utilize this. But if you're going to move these to buy list, a dozen feels fine for the current price. And it's weird to say, like, in the description of this card, like, red makes a ton of treasures, and then talk about how not a lot of players actually play that. It's like, well, you got a lot of players playing casually locally. They might not be playing all the new draw spells that make treasures, or they might not want to make treasures because that's too much acceleration for red, and that generates too much heat, etc. So that's kind of like a local feel. I know for me, I think I do have a bunch of players that play red, but it's all part and parcel of some other package. So Facebreaker is not really going to be a card they are looking for, but I do understand that there are like two types of red players in the world, which is weird to think about because sometimes they all share the same brain cell. Yeah. And I'm one of them. But this is another one I was like, you got to know your outs, which is why I said if you're going to go to buy list, a dozen looks fine. But if you want to move locally, that's a little tough. So kind of figure that one out. Like I feel like that's been a wrinkle for a lot of the stuff we've been talking about recently, and is like kind of holds really important here. If your red players are kind of lax and they're like me, like I play Zozu, I just want to make the game go fast. I don't need a lot of those treasures. I got a lot of mono rocks because that's just what the deck do, and I don't need Facebreaker. But if I'm somebody who's going to be playing Ancient Copper Dragon and Dockside and just looking to do whatever it is I'm going to do with those, then yeah, Facebreaker is like in my wheelhouse, and absolutely I'll slam that card all day long. So like, yeah, this is a kind of a pick and choose moment based on your expected outs. What do you have to say about Facebreaker? Because I've kind of stolen the show here.
Oh, you're good. So when you touch on this thing being just like a good engine, so I have played Blood Pod since it's existed in CEDH. I haven't been more excited for a card like other than Professional Facebreaker in a long time, because it is such a good engine just for card advantage, for filtering. It doesn't just have to be a combo engine or for big dumb dinosaurs. If you're going wide, this card is great because it gives you treasure tokens, which you can use to get more cards. This to me kind of slid into almost a Dark Confidant type role.
Yeah.
In CEDH, after Dark Confidant got bad and Treasures got a ton of support. It's easy to cast, 1 red pip, it's an easy splash, and just the ability to, I mean, early game it's great, because Menace is actually relevant in a lot of CEDH games, and a lot of EDH games.
That's right,
actually. Because people just don't want to sacrifice their commander and whatever other creature. So they're like, well, I guess I'll just take 2. Because I don't care about 2 damage when I have 40 life. Except that now I get a treasure, so I get to draw an extra card if I want it. I love this card. I think it is a card that if it doesn't hit a reprint in the next 6 to 8 months, could very realistically hit that $10 price point. If the Gaming Co. stops anchoring the price, obviously.
Yeah, that was the funniest thing to see.
Yeah.
113 foils, you say, huh?
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
How'd you get all those? But yeah, no, I think this card is great. I think it's one that kind of, it was obviously very hyped at the time because it was in a bunch of lists when the set came out.
Yep.
And Capenna kind of got forgotten about. People don't really talk about it anymore. It was an awful limited environment, so people wanted to move on quickly. The gilded foils were cool. But at the end of the day, this wasn't a set that had a lot of staying power. So to me, Facebreaker is like a sneaky heater because it was forgotten about with, you know, the hubbub over Vivian that's basically pod / natty order and all the other cards, the triomes and everything. And this to me, this to me was actually probably the best card in the set.
Oh my God.
And it is really good, and I think it's been forgotten about, and it's just waiting to just creep up to that price point where it's like, all right, when did this happen? You just wake up and you're like, oh, it's $10. Well, that makes sense. I guess I should have known.
We talked about how rancid Capenna was not too long ago, because I remember bringing up the Donglair page for this before and mentioning it. But at $9, the 3 most expensive cards are Rafine's Triumph, Jetmir's Garden, and Spara's Headquarters. At $7, it's Xander's Lounge and Ledger Shredder. Okay, that's 4 out of the 5 Triumphs. The 5th Triumph is $6 at Zayator's Proving Ground. And then Professional Facebreaker at $6. It is the second most expensive non-land card in the set, or third most expensive non-land card in the set. The second most expensive non-land card. Only Ledger Shredder beats it out as a non-land. It is
pretty good company.
It is. That's also how rancid the rest of the set was.
That is also very true.
Obnixilis, the Planeswalker everybody's flipping out about, is down there at a lowly $3. Bootlegger Stash is a whole $4. An offer you can't refuse, an uncommon, is $3. Like, that is... It's a heater set, my guy.
The new standard, baby.
Yeah. Ugh. Okay. Anything before I just dive?
No.
SNC. All right. So for at MtG Cabalcast on Facebook, Patreon, and YouTube, I am at Halt. I am Reptar on Twitter. You are
at Damon_Thirst.
And we'll see you next week.
Deuces.